Hey there, and welcome back to Common Knowledge. It's episode 198, and we're still looking at 10 plus common Magic the Gathering cards. And I'll tell you whether they're good in the Pauper format or not. Hair looks like shit. That's why we're wearing the hat today. But hey, I get to represent my Cardinals, and that makes me feel good. Anyway, what is our first card of the day? It's Selvalla's Enforcer, which has some incredibly good art. Really like this elf here. Savala's Enforcer is 3 and a green for a 2/2 elf warrior with Parlay. When this creature enters, each player reveals the top card of their library. For each non-land card revealed this way, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Then each player draws a card. Conspiracy is... I haven't actually played Conspiracy. I think it's supposed to be a 4-player format, right? Or like a multiplayer format. And we see a lot of these cards, and Battle Bond also kind of fit into that as well, where that was a multiplayer format. A lot of those cards also work really well in Commander, which is another 4-player format, multiplayer format. So we have a lot of cards that work better with more players. Savala's Enforcer is one of those. This parlay ability is really good if you have lots of people at the table and they all reveal the top card of their library. If they're non-lands, maybe you put a ton of counters on this guy. You could put 2, 3, even potentially 4 counters on this guy a turn, and that'd be awesome. When you're playing 1v1, the max counters this guy can get is 2. He does draw you a card, but he also draws the opponent a card. You don't necessarily want to do that. And that's kind of the problem here, is that this thing is a 4-mana 2/2 that gets this ability only when it enters, and so it can be... what are your options here? The options are both of you flip a land, so each of you draws a land, and this thing is just a 2/2. That's pretty bad. Like, you're getting what is that? That's like a Elvish Visionary, right? That's a Elvish Visionary. It's a 2-mana. Yeah. So I mean, Elvish Visionary is a 2-mana 1/1. So not exactly comparable. I'm sure there's a 3-mana 2/2, or maybe even a 4-mana 2/2 that draws you a card when it comes into play. Just can't think of one off the top of my head. Probably an elf too. Anyway, so you could have a 4-mana 2/2 that draws you and the opponent a card. You don't really want that. That sounds like a bad deal. You could have one of you flips a land and one of you flips a non-land. So now you have a 4-mana 3/3 that draws you a card and your opponent a card. Still not great. And then maybe the best you could hope for is 2 non-lands. So you get a 4-mana 4/4 that draws each of you a card. And that's also a bad deal. That's the problem. These are bad deals regardless of what happens. So this is not really a Pauper playable card. And when I say not really, I mean it's definitely not a Pauper playable card. And honestly, this effect isn't even good enough to show up in Commander or something like that. Even because you're not going to blink this thing, right? Because you'd lose all the counters that potentially go on it and try it again. So that's... I don't know. It's a one-trick pony, and the trick is that it draws everyone a card, and that doesn't feel very good. I wouldn't even call that group hug. I would call that bad. I would just call that bad. For the Pauper format, we got to give this thing like a 1.4. It's going to stink up your deck. Don't play it. But maybe, get a copy just so you have the cool art. I like cool art. Mine Excavation is 1 and a white for a sorcery. Return target artifact or enchantment card from a graveyard to its owner's hand. It also has Conspire. As you cast this spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control that share a color with it. When you do, copy it, and you may choose a new target for the copy. That's cool. That is cool. I think Conspire is a neat ability here, and a neat mechanic. And Shadowmoor has lots of creatures that have multiple colors, so it's easier to tap them down to get that Conspire stuff. I believe as you play this spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control that share color with it. When you do, copy it, and you may choose a new target for the copy. I think if you had a ton of creatures, you could just kind of keep doing this. I think that's how Conspire works. because you'd be casting a new copy of it, and the new copy would also have Conspire on it. So if you had, 8 white creatures, you could keep tapping those down and keep casting more copies of Mind Excavation, which is kind of cool. I like that if you have a giant board for some reason and are able to grab that, and white is able to make some pretty giant boards. The effect itself, I don't mind paying 2 mana for a sorcery. I'd probably rather it not be a sorcery, but still, 2 mana to return an artifact or enchantment from your graveyard to your hand. That there's plenty of good artifacts and enchantments that you'll find in the Pauper format, and even artifact creatures or enchantment creatures. There's plenty of those out there too, and this could grab any of those. So I don't mind that. I don't know if white is necessarily the best color for it. It is the best color in terms of having a wide board and being able to tap down a bunch of creatures, but is it the best one for grabbing the right artifacts and right enchantments? If I'm thinking, Bogles is certainly playing white enchantments. Mono White Heroic obviously is playing white enchantments. So you could make an argument that maybe you get back your ethereal armor, and that could be pretty good. You could get back an armadillo cloak or something, and that could be pretty good too. Artifact wise, white's not really messing around with artifacts as much. I mean, I guess there's like Boros synthesizer, maybe, but everything's so cheap in Boros synthesizer. I don't think you really care to get back cards. You'd rather just kind of keep flipping more off the top of your library. So this probably doesn't really have a place, but it's an okay card, and probably a sneaky good commander card if you're playing in a if you're playing some sort of Boglesy kind of deck there, or some Enchantress style deck, or even some kind of affinity deck that's playing white for some reason. There's probably a reason. Who is it? Not Brina, but she starts with B. She's one of the 4 color commanders, who makes like a bunch of Thopters, I think. Forgot her name. Anyway, you can tell me in the comments. But yeah, I think Mine Excavation could have some uses. Probably a lot more in Enchantress decks. Those decks tend to be a lot more white focused, and Mine Extraction will work with that. So, for the Pauper format, it's fine. It's totally fine. In fact, I think it's so fine. I'll give it like a 3.1. But I still don't think it's going in anybody's deck, unless they make some really good white enchantments or artifacts that totally throw the format into like a new meta. But until then, I don't think there's anything so important that we need to spend a card and that mana to just get it back to our hand. Blightning is a cool card, 1 in Rakdos mana, so 1 black and a red. For a sorcery, Blightning deals 3 damage to target player or planeswalker. That player or planeswalker's controller discards 2 cards. Don't have to worry about the planeswalker part, but dealing 3 damage and forcing them to discard 2 cards is awesome. Like, this is the best mind rot. Just the best mind rot. I mean, Wrench Mind is also pretty good. That's a whole mana less. I mean, Hymn to Torok is obviously even better than that, but that's banned in the format. This is good. This has seen some play. Not a ton of play, but has seen some play and see some fringe play still these days. You have some kind of burn decks that like to also take resources away from the opponent. You don't necessarily love 3 mana for 3 damage. That's never going to feel too good. But these things together, if you're able to get this out on turn 3, when your opponent still has some cards, this can really shape a game. make them discard 2 potentially useful cards. If it's, if you're doing it on turn 3, that could be their like turn 3 and 4 plays. And those are very important plays in the Pauper format. That's when you should really start being able to throw out haymakers. So to force them to lose out on resources and do some damage in the process. Blightning is cool. It's I stopped playing before Shards of Alara came out. I ended at the end of the Lorwyn double block. So what's that, like Eventide, Morningtide, something like that. And so I never got to play with Shards of Alara. And every time I see a Shards of Alara card, This might be blasphemy here, but I think every Shards of Alara card I've seen has really disappointed me. Blightning's not one of them. Lightning might be the the one card in Shards of Lara I went, ooh, that's a good one. I like that. We're gonna give this a pretty good score. I don't think it quite gets the 5 to go to like Pauper playability. Even fringe play, I don't think is quite enough to get it to a 5. But I will give it a 4.8. That's a good Magic card right there. Really good cube card too. Like just something that kind of it's like, hey, this is what black does. It makes you discard cards. This is what red does. It deals damage. We put them both on a card. It's great. It's not a lightning helix, but it's pretty damn close in terms of cool card that we slapped two good cards together and made a different card. Good stuff on Blightning. Scarblade Scout. I like this card, even though we have it. We've had this card for a while, and we'll probably just get more of this card. Scarblade Scout is 1 and a black for a 2/2 elf scout with lifelink. When this creature enters, you mill 2 cards. Let me show you something. I can't remember the exact name of the card, but it will not be hard to find. Mana value is equal to 2. Let's say legal in Pauper. And we will say Outlaws of Thunder Junction. There we go. Desperate Bloodseeker. 1 and a black for a 2/2 vampire instead of an elf scout. Ooh. With lifelink, and when it enters, target player mills 2 cards. Okay. I guess it's different. This says target player mills 2 cards, so that's a crime. This is not a crime. This is only you milling the 2 cards, but you get potentially better creature types out of it. Is elf scout better than vampire? That actually might be a good question. I bet there's enough vampire support that maybe vampire's even better. So yeah, I think Desperate Bloodseeker ends up being the better card. I thought this was just a straight reprint, but this one says target, which does make a big difference. This one just does yourself. Still, I think Scarblade Scout is pretty good. It's not going to show up in elf decks or anything. It wouldn't even really show up in dredge decks. You could make a kind of argument about it, but I think if you want this kind of card for a dredge deck, what you would actually probably want instead is Mire Triton. Because Mire Triton, yeah, it has a point less of toughness, but also this thing has Death Touch, and you mill the 2 cards, and you gain 2 life. So you are, you're mitigating some of the life gain you might get out of the scout, but you're also getting a Death Touch creature that can, stop a Tolarian Terror or something like that. And this guy, never going to stop a Tolarian Terror. So I think you have a number of options that are better. If you need something for crimes, if you need something for vampires, if you need something with Death Touch, we just have better options. But as far as Grizzly Bears go, Grizzly Bear with, lifelink mill 2 cards, not bad. If a Gates deck ever needed black, not a whole lot of black Gates decks. But if you ever needed a Gates deck that played black, this card along with the Desperate Bloodseeker that we just looked at, like those would be pretty decent options. I mean, they're not quite outlaw medics, but pretty good. Pretty good. Anyway, I'm going to give Scarblade Scout a let's go 3.1. I like this little guy. I mostly just like 2 mana creatures with lifelink. I think I'm just a big fan of those, whether it's Outlaw Medic or this or not available in Pauper, but Bright Blade Stoat. Love a Bright Blade Stoat. And also Knight of Meadowgrain, which is kind of just a Bright Blade Stoat that is a little harder to cast because it's double white. But I'm just a big fan, big fan. Anyway, what is our next card? It's oh hell yeah! It's Mon's Goblin Raiders. This one's pretty simple. It's a single red mana for a 1/1 goblin. That's all it is. But also just so classic. This is from the very beginning, right? This is alpha. Yeah. $33 for a 1/1. 1 mana 1/1. $33. Or you could pay $7 for a beta, and honestly, nobody would really tell the difference. Mon's Goblin Raiders is obviously not a very good card. It's just a 1-mana 1/1, but it's also an incredible card. It's had 2 art printings, and I would say both art printings are great. I think I prefer the original one, but the Venter's art is also quite good. It's obviously it looks a little bit more like the goblins that we've come to know and love in the Magic community, but I also like these guys. They're just nice. You get a lot of space for flavor text here. Obviously, they didn't use a whole lot of flavor text on this one, but um, yeah, it's a classic card. Not a good Pauper card, obviously, but you can do so much better with your 1-mana goblins. So, sadly, I've got to give it a bad score. It's like a 1.3. It's not. I mean, it's not so actively bad that I'm going to give it a straight 1. But you just have so many other options. We've come a long way from alpha. I don't know if you've known that. Next card, Syndicate Enforcer, 3 and a black for a 3/2 human rogue with extort. Whenever you cast a spell, you may pay a hybrid black or white. We call that an Ortsov over here. And if you do, each opponent loses a life and you gain that much life. Pretty simple card. We see extort on a number of different cards, and extort's really good ability because it basically functions on every single card you play. If you're casting any spell while this guy is out on the field, you can just pay 1 extra and drain your opponent for 1. That's really good. And you can do that with every spell. That's cool. And it stacks. So if you have multiple creatures with extort out, you can pay multiple times and get that effect, that drain multiple times. Extort seems like it should be busted, and it's just not. It's just not. Maybe it's not quite yet, but Gatecrash was a while ago, and we still haven't found extort to be all that busted. I wonder. We can check this out. What is the cheapest card with extort? Cheapest in the Pauper format, at least. So let's go with the word extort. And I guess they're all going to be in black and white because it's an Orthoff ability, and we'll say legal in Pauper, and we'll call that good. And then we will. Oh, well, there's only 5, so I was going to say then we can sort them, but we don't have to sort them. So there's 2. There's a few 2-mana guys here. Bat 1/2 bat that has extort on it. That's not terrible. Or a 2/2, just a Grizzly Bear with extort, or a 2/1 Lifelinker with extort. Not terrible. None of these are terrible. I'd say the 3-mana ones here that we've seen, even the Syndicate Enforcer, which we're about to get to a score of, I think they cost too much. I don't really want to have that effect at 3 or 4 mana because at that point, if it's not down early enough, I don't feel like I'm getting enough value out of it. I think this could totally work for an Ortsov Blade. We'll go back here. I think this could totally work. Not this card specifically, but this mechanic could work for an Ortsov Blade deck because you're usually casting a lot of different spells and bouncing cards back to your hand, and you do usually end up using a lot of your mana or all of your mana every single turn, but the times that you don't, or the times later in the game where you need a little bit of extra reach and you're still able to cast spells, and because your spells are bouncing spells, you have more spells to cast over the course of a game, and your spells are all pretty cheap because again you want to bounce them and cast them again. Because of all those things, maybe you do have an extra couple mana laying around a turn or two and are able to use the extort a turn or two and get those extra couple points of damage, get those extra couple points of life. That could be pretty good. I think extort's a really cool ability. You usually see extort get played because people want to play the good cards that just accidentally have extort on them. What is it, like blind obedience? Yeah, like blind obedience has extort on it. Are you playing it for the extort? Probably not. You're probably playing it for the artifacts and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped ability, or there's the what's it called? Crypt something. Cryptcast. Yeah, Cryptcast has extort, but are you really using Cryptcast for the extort, or are you using it to double your swamp's mana value or mana production? Maybe you can use it for both, because doubling the production means you have more things to use for extort. So you see some of those things get used a little bit more in commander games, but when we're talking about Pauper, I think you'd really only be thinking about using the 2 mana ones, and even then you're, the Ortsov Blade deck, I wouldn't say is solved, but it definitely has a bunch of cards that you're going to play, and I don't think there's enough room to add in an extort creature. But extort's a cool ability. On a 4 mana 3/2 though, not really my cup of tea. I'll give it a 2.1, but that's all I can really give it. Too expensive. Oil Gorger Troll is 3 and double green for a 3/4 Phyrexian Troll Warrior. When this creature enters, you gain 3 life. Then if you control a permanent with an oil counter on it, you draw a card. All right, it's been a little while since we've done one of these, or we've had this kind of conversation, but you might know what I'm going to say. It's a 5 mana green creature, so is it better than Avenging Hunter? And the answer is no. No, it's not. I mean, don't feel bad, Oil Gorger Troll. Very few green creatures are better than Avenging Hunter at any mana cost, but particularly at 5, it's just harder to find anything better than that, and that's why we play Avenging Hunter until it gets banned, which it probably won't get banned at this point. I think it's been in the format long enough, and we've banned all the other initiative creatures at this point, that if it hasn't gotten banned already, it's probably not getting banned. Anyway, Avenging Hunter, really good, obviously. Oil Gorger Troll, this is a 3/4. Avenging Hunter is a 5/4. Avenging Hunter has trample. This doesn't. This can draw you a card and gain you 3 life. Okay, but if you keep the initiative with the Avenging Hunter for long enough, the first time you get a land, guaranteed land drop, or that kind of is a drawn card in your hand from that, even though it's a drawn land, not quite as good as just a drawn card generally, but still pretty darn good. And then I don't remember everything in the initiative. I know there's a trap that loses the opponent 5 life, which I would argue is probably better than you gaining 3 life. It's really rude. I would say it's rude to all 5 mana green creatures out there in the Pauper format, but if you're not an Avenging Hunter, you just kind of have no place. And also the casting cost of this is harder. It's 3 and double green. Avenging Hunter is 4 and a green. It's only a single green. You can splash it in so many other decks. This is a little harder to splash because you need 2 of those green mana symbols. Not great. Also requiring you to have another card with an oil counter on it. There's not many good oil counter cards in the Pauper format, and this guy doesn't make me want to play. Like, it doesn't incentivize me enough to go find an oil counter card to use. So I'm not going to do that. Yeah, I think overall this thing's just really bad. Unfortunately bad. Was probably decent and limited, where you had a lot of creatures with oil counter things or permanents with oil counter things on them. But when you have all of Magic to pull from, I don't think you're going to pull enough things from Phyrexia all be one to matter here. So we'll go ahead and I don't even think I can justify giving it a 2. I think it has to go lower than that. I think we got to go for like a 1.7. Sad. Custody Squire is 4 and a white for a 3/3 Spirit Cleric with flying, and it also has Will of the Council. When this creature enters, starting with you, each player votes for an artifact, creature, or enchantment card in your graveyard. Return each card with the most votes or tied for the most votes to your hand. Yeah, similar to what we said with our first card, which had the parlay on it. Will of the Council and most things that have you vote also are going to be better for multiplayer formats. This one also from Conspiracy, and it's also made its way into a couple of Commander sets, which makes sense. Those are sets where you have 4 players. There's a lot more voting. If Conspiracy is kind of the Battle Bond 2v2 format that I believe it is, I don't know a whole lot about Conspiracy, obviously. But if it is that, then this makes more sense because now you and your partner are able to vote on different cards that you can bring back to your hand, and your opponent's probably not going to vote for different cards. They're probably going to vote for the same cards, so you don't get more cards. That just makes sense. This pretty good in Commander. Yes, you're still probably only going to get one card out of it. If your opponents are smart's the wrong word, because you can make deals with this. You can like do politics stuff in Commander where you're able to say, hey, I have this board wipe in my graveyard. I need you to vote for this board wipe because I'm going to play this card and get this other card that I want. But if you vote for the board wipe, I can then play the board wipe, and that can help all of us. Or, I can get the piece of targeted removal back, but I'm also going to want this card back too. So I'm voting for that. You can vote for the targeted removal, and I promise that I will use it on that guy's commander or whatever. So pretty good in that format. When we talk about Pauper, this is a 5-mana 3/3 flyer, which is a pretty bad rate. And it's really only going to get you one card back from your graveyard to your hand. Oh, also it says artifact, creature, or enchantment. So I guess targeted removal has to be on one of those permanents, or that board wipe has to be on one of those permanents. You're not just getting a Wrath of God back with this. That's too bad. I suppose this can work with some stuff in the Pauper format as well, but you're not going to be able to do cool Archaeomancer loops, or the Ardent Elementalist loops with this card that you would with those. So it's not a card made for the Pauper format, so it's not going to get a good score for the Pauper format. Makes sense to me. We're going to go for I'm still going to give this one a 2.2. It does get you a card back from your graveyard and is still a 3/3 flyer, and that's not bad on its own. It just it has so much of a higher ceiling that you'll never get in the Pauper format, so that hurts a little bit. Messenger Hawk is 2 and a hybrid Dimir mana, so a blue or a black, for a 1/2 bird scout with flying, and when this creature enters, you create a clue token, and this creature gets +2/+0 as long as you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn. Interesting. I remember talking about this in the full Avatar Pauper buyer's guide thing that I made, and I thought it was pretty good then, but like not good enough, and that's still how I feel. Uh, we see that first line of text, not the flying, so I guess the second line of text. We see that on a good number of cards that we like, Thraben Inspectors. Love a Thraben Inspector. But a 3-mana Thraben Inspector, no, that's where it doesn't quite work out. Yeah, it's a flyer, okay, but at 1/2, like 3 mana for a 1/2, that's worse than a Windrake. What are you doing? It is a Windrake that investigates, so maybe that justifies losing the point of power. But you do get that power back if you draw 2 or more cards this turn. You can draw the second card by cracking a clue token, but you can also draw the second card by doing lots of other things. And hey, this is Dimir. You know what else is in Dimir and wants you to draw a lot of cards? Sneaky Snacker. So I guess you could play this in combination with Sneaky Snacker. Although Sneaky Snacker doesn't necessarily care about being played in Dimir decks. And that's why it's busted. Messenger Hawk not busted, and not particularly good. 7 cents, and it's kind of for a reason. This is like an okay limited card, but I wouldn't say anything more than that. We'll go for a 2.1. I think this is our final official card of the day. Rabid Rats, 1 and a black for a 1/1 rat. Tap it, and target blocking creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. That's interesting. I do think that's interesting because we've certainly had cards like Angelic Page that can tap and give a creature +1/+1. I think there's even like a soldier who can tap and give one of your attacking creatures +1/+1. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. So lots of things that will give your guys +1/+1, or you can decide on giving something +1/+1. But the pluses are a little easier Because, yeah, okay, I'm. It's pluses are not removal spells, they're combat tricks. This can be like a removal spell. That's cool. Like, this is kind of like flanking. Kinda. Now, obviously, it can't work on itself unless you also gave this thing vigilance somehow. But I do like the idea that now your opponent feels like they can't block with. I guess they can, because then you just use this anyway, and the creature would die. So it's like they'd be jumping anyway. But if they had a valuable creature that they think that they can block all the time with, maybe this takes it down a peg. Maybe this is this is a this is very fringy, but if you had some type of indestructible creature that only had one toughness, and they now think that, well, I have an indestructible blocker, it doesn't matter how low the toughness is because this thing just blocks all day. Not against this guy. That's a pretty big edge case, though. I think I'm turning on this a little bit, because if you are an opponent, you're probably using your 1/1s to chump anyway. So what's it matter if they chump to the creature that attacked with it, that they're blocking, or they chump to this thing's ability? I guess that part doesn't matter. I do still think it's interesting to give something -1/-1 until end of turn. Um, but man, it would be a whole lot better if it could just do this without the blocking part. Like, what if this just said target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn? That'd be rad. That would be very cool. But we're not living in that world, which makes sense for the stronghold times. Okay, we got to give this thing a real score here, and I do think it's bad. I don't quite want to go down into the ones. I'll give it a 2. Probably deserves to go down into the ones, but it's interesting. Interesting matters. We'll do a bonus card, and we'll call it, Triton Shore Stalker, single blue mana for a 1/1 Merfolk Rogue, and this creature can't be blocked. I do love that text. That is pretty good. If you have anything that needs to get in for damage to trigger, having a couple of these little guys are great. I have a commander deck that's all about unblockable creatures that you then throw equipment on. It's a mono blue deck that has a guy with horsemanship as the commander. Mostly just for fun. He's certainly not the most efficient card I could be using in that slot. But it's cool to have like a Triton Shore Stalker and a Naga. Oh, no, Slitherblade. That's what it's called, but it is a Naga, or I guess just like a snake now. But Slitherblade, like all those kinds of cool things. I just like creatures that can't be blocked. I think they're fun. Like Phantom Warrior. I like Phantom Warrior. Phantom Warrior is not a very good card, but I like it. Triton Shore Stalker is I mean, there's all sorts of removal that can take this thing out. Electricaries and stuff like that, and the festivities. There's plenty of ways that this thing just accidentally dies. But I can't give this a bad score. It's too cool to just say, hey, this guy can't be blocked and he's going to get in for damage, and maybe I put a bunch of enchantments on it and then swing in, or I put a bunch of equipment on it and it swings in, or find some way to pump this thing up turn over turn and get value that way. It's a 1 mana thing that your opponent probably ends up having to deal with. And maybe you get enough value out of that. You could also probably just play Ginger Brute. And Ginger Brute's pretty good. I'm still gonna give this thing a 3.3. I think we'll go with that score. I like unblockable dudes. What can I say? That's it for this one. We'll catch you on the next one for 199. Can't believe it. Anyway, we'll see you then.